Have you ever met someone where you immediately felt something wasn't right or there was something off about them which no one else noticed, and been proven correct? There was this one kid that all my friends were friends with. Several of my girlfriends dated him, and throughout our late teens, he and I interacted and argued a lot. I always thought we was a scary mofo. He held a knife to my throat one day and two of my guy friends pulled him off me. He said he was trying to scare me, but I made it clear that my roommate's being your friend or not, I'm calling the cops if you ever come to my house again. My friends all tried to calm me down and say he was messing with me for always arguing with him, but I was adamant. 3 years later, he kills his mom and stepdad in their sleep and he is in a state mental facility for the rest of his life. Stories like this worry me, one part because people like that can be anywhere, but also because of the people that don't seem to notice. You don't just pull a knife on someone messing around, and I'm sure there were lots of other little signs. My mother-in-law's new, now soon to be ex-husband. From the day I met him, I didn't like him. I should add that they decided to get married after less than 2 months of even knowing each other. I felt uncomfortable when he looked at me, and just overall felt really strange when he was around. He seemed oddly possessive of her, even around my husband and I, almost like he was obsessed or something. I tolerated him occasionally because she seemed to be genuinely happy. Fast forward a few months, we find out that he's a convicted rapist and has done 3 separate stints in jail, and B, he's throwing my tiny 110 pounds mill down the stairs and beating up on her any chance he gets. He's 6 feet 4 inches and I'd guess 240 pounds. Oh, and he beat his ex-wife apparently too. To put the icing on the cake, he used religion. She is a very devout woman. To win her over. Turns out he got kicked out of the prison ministry he was in for sleeping with female inmates. Total scumbag. Took me 6 months of this crap to convince my mill to leave, finally filing for divorce this week. I doubt you need to be told this, but make sure she's not by herself. He sounds positively batshit and he might try to hurt her. Yes, my younger sister had a friend who gave me the creeps. This girl didn't do anything in particular to give me the heebie-jeebies. Then one day, when they were in high school, the girl brought in cookies for the boys. Turns out she baked dog crap into them, made kids sick, and she was expelled from the school system. I used to work at a youth center. I'm the easiest person in the world to get along with, but we had a hire that I just couldn't get along with, and I quite vocal that there was something off with him. I would make it a point to work the same shift as me so I could supervise him. He would let the kids do all kinds of stupid crap that could get them hurt, and when I confronted him, he had a freak out and threatened to fight me. I told our ED that it was him or me. He was let go. 2 years later, I get a call from my old ED. I had long since moved to a real job. She told me he was in the news for child pornography charges. Felt sick for a long time. I was young, around 22, and my friend's dad worked at a bar across the street from their townhouse. He was retired, so he did it to get out of the house. Because of that, we would frequent the bar. There was a regular there that everyone knew. Seemed nice enough, but something didn't fit in my eyes. Nothing specific. Don't know why. He was nice. I just didn't like him. Guy had money. Didn't flaunt it, but you knew. He was always helping people make money as well. Giving them little tips and ideas that paid off. Nothing big, but he seemed to know what he was doing. One night he was talking with my friend's dad about an opportunity. My friend's dad was interested. Heck, he had already seen the good this guy did. Investment was a tidy sum and some people in the bar were interested and joined in. I told my friend, talk to your dad. I don't feel good about this. He asked why. I told him I didn't know. I just don't like it. He did and was able to convince him that he was retired and take the safe route instead of the big payoff. His dad listened, begrudgingly, but it was his son, so he listened. He even asked me why I thought it was a bad idea. I repeated, I don't know. I just do. I told him I just don't like the guy for some reason. Week later the guy disappears, never comes back, and takes off with about 8 patrons' investments. I don't know exactly how much, but 150k was mentioned. When it got around to the police, we found out he was doing the same thing at other bars in the city. My best friend's dad. The way he looked at her and spoke to her, it was really weird and I never knew why. He was more like her friend than her dad. I then ended up living with them for a while, and the fights those two would have were even weirder. Almost like an old couple. Turns out he was molesting her. I hate myself to this day for not seeing it sooner. Heck, I even lived there. She's a great person and recovered to be a fantastic adult though. It isn't your fault. You weren't a trained psychologist or a detective. There's no way you could have known. This one guy in our middle and high school group of friends. He is good friends with most of my friends, but only an acquaintance to me. There was always this inside joke or gag that he is a pedophile due to his humorous awkward behavior around kids, and he plays along with the gag. He also always seems to be very clingy to his best friend's little sister. I however see his behavior around kids as creepy rather than funny, unlike my friends. Fast forward to many years later, I saw him on the news of being arrested for co-running a child pornography ring and caught having sex with a 12-year-old. Weird thing was, my friends were all really surprised when they found out. I wasn't, but was still pretty shocked. Talk about being devoted to the joke. New guy started on my job. First time I met him, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. It was almost like he stared through you. 3 months go by and he's in another part of the office, so we just pass each other and say hello. We have a staff meeting and are told by our director that the guy has been terminated. Turns out he was a freaking stalker. He kept hitting on all the girls in the office. If they ignored them, he would follow them after work, even to their homes. He tried forcing himself on one of the girls from HR. He didn't know she was from HR and harassed her in the parking lot. Tried pinning her up against the car. Cops came. He was taken away in handcuffs. Turns out that he had prior sexual assault cases. P.S. I'm a guy. Just knew right from the start that he was a weirdo. Well, he's not a very good stalker if he doesn't even know the job of the person he stalks. Yes, a friend of my brother's from a year ago, Phil. He was in his 20s. My bro met him somehow and invited him over. Dude crashed for 4 days. Phil was a compulsive liar. You could watch his eyes go dark and his brain start working to come up with more bulls. It could be as small as claiming a crappy one-liner got him laid, or as obviously false as claiming he was my cellmate during a night in jail. It wasn't just the lies. He set off my primitive alarm system. I knew he was dangerous. I spent months terrified for my idiot brother, begging him to stop hanging out with this guy. I googled Phil and found out he'd robbed a junior high. Also, while not a member, he associated with people from the Aryan Brotherhood. Not kids playing Nazi dress up, adults with guns and connections. My brother finally stopped talking to him. They were hanging out and drinking when Phil pulled a gun, cocked it, held it to a mutual buddy's head and asked in an unsmiling monotone, "How freaked out would you be if this was for real?" Phil killed himself 2 months ago. I was at a babysitter's house when I was a kid. This dude named Rocky came to the house. He was all twitchy, cursed too much, was drunk, had a mullet and scars on his face. He scared me to begin with, but he ended up throwing me off a porch. I was around 7. I kept telling the babysitter that he was a bad guy. Years later, he and his GF and another man broke into an elderly woman's home to rob her and ended up killing her. Holy frick, dude. I would have noped directly to my mom. Heck to the no with mullets. Yes, we had a candidate come in for an interview, and while she had the skills, she just seemed a little suspicious. After the interview, I did a little research and discovered that her old place of employment she had listed did not exist and her address and phone number were fake. We decided not to move forward with her due to the many questions we had, but later found out that she had been arrested for embezzling about $50K from her old employers. I remember meeting an older guy at my friend's neighbor's house when I was really little, like 4 or so. He gave me a flower that he'd picked and tried to talk to me. He gave me the creeps so badly that I started to cry and felt like I was going to throw up. I'm 33 now and I still remember what he looked like and how he made me feel just standing near him. A couple of days later, my mum grills me about him. Turns out he violently raped a little girl not long after I met him. I didn't find that part out until years later. I wonder what it is about people who are evil that causes the vibe. Because what he did isn't really out of the realm of what a nice guy would do to try to make a little girl feel welcome in a strange house. But you knew instantly. I'm sure I don't need to say it, but don't lose that intuition. Boss hired a guy into an inside sales job to join a team I had been on for 5 years. Super nice dude. Great with customers on the phone, etc. But I just had this queasy feeling about him. We worked together for a year in a small office, 8 people, so we got to know each other well. He did the best Donald Duck impression ever, but he also talked a lot about his stepdaughter. He often said she's 13 going on 21. One day his wife showed up at the office and said CPS needed to see both parents immediately. As they were leaving the office he told me it must be a mistake or something to do with a big fight his wife and daughter had had. It was a trap. The cops were there and arrested him. He had been having sex with his stepdaughter since she was 9. I hated being right. Now when I hear someone say about his daughter that she's XXX going on 21, I flinch. He wasn't having sex with her. He was raping her. It's an important distinction. In middle school, there was an individual, we'll call him K, who became a part of my circle of friends. He was a friend of a friend who grafted onto us, probably because he didn't have many other friends options. Essentially, he was that lost puppy acquaintance that large groups of friends seem to always have. Anyways, as 8th grade progressed, K's oddness started to manifest itself. Being mid-pubescent boys, we often played practical jokes pranks on one another. If someone left their locker unlocked, we'd lock it with one of our locks for them. Sometimes you'd redecorate for them. We started to notice that K's idea of pranks didn't exactly conform to what we'd consider as normal. K was known to completely empty a locker that was left open, throwing everything, including textbooks and personal belongings, in the garbage. He was also known to empty cartons of milk into someone's locker, not really caring if he damaged ruined stuff. Needless to say, he didn't engender himself to many in my circle. It also led to a few of us thinking of him as off. Fast forward a few years and we're graduating high school. All of us are excelling in our studies, honor classes, advanced placement classes, etc. K is still hanging around, really close to his original friend. Pleasantries are exchanged, yearbooks signed with platitudes, and most of us go off to college. K's original friend joins the military. K stays in town, presumably to attend college locally. Press fast forward another 3 years and I get an update from a friend back home. K has killed himself by poisoning himself with arsenic while in the back of a state trooper's vehicle. He was in the back of said vehicle because he'd confessed to the premeditated kidnapping, murder, dismemberment of a young woman. Every now and then, I remember and start thinking about a lot of this. With 20/20 hindsight, it doesn't shock me. I could never process K's definition of friendship camaraderie, as I thought it to be heartless and cruel at times. TLDR, I went to school with a cruel prankster who kidnapped, murdered and dismembered someone. That's like extra creepy, because we all knew that one guy who didn't fit. I knew a kid who was never overtly creepy, but certainly seemed a bit socially awkward when we were teenagers. Just kind of a nerd, really. He ended up going to jail as a major child trader, and would often photograph little girls in public. The news said he had something like tens of thousands of photos and videos. A childhood friend of mine was like that. Socially awkward, introverted, and a little weird, but so are plenty of people. Got caught downloading gigabytes of child pee at college. Yup, a guy from the field was brought in to convert an antiquated POS system to a PC back office system. From day one he seemed shady as frick. I blew off some of it as a culture clash moving into the office. Nope. He was testing to see just what he could get away with and found every possible way to game the process. I eventually busted him for embezzling over $300 K. Mother-in-law introduced her new boyfriend. This guy just dominated the room. He acted way too friendly. He immediately began telling jokes, trying very hard to act like he was part of the family. He acted like he'd known us for ages. I saw through the act. I told my wife immediately that the guy wasn't genuine. I couldn't tell exactly what his game was, but I knew he was full of crap. Wife told me I was jumping the gun and that I shouldn't be so quick judge. I watched him around my kinds and family as best I could. Cut several months later, their relationship is strained as money disappears and checks for bills get cancelled, making bills go unpaid. He always had some kind of excuse. Finally Mil gets tired of it but won't exactly kick him out. They rented a house together. She doesn't see him for a couple days and then gets a frantic call asking if anyone's been by to see him and can she get some of his clothes and things and meet him somewhere to get the stuff. Not at the house. Mill agrees but must finish lunch they've already ordered with her other daughter. While eating lunch they overhear police at a nearby table mention boyfriend's name and radio convo includes their home address. Mill interrupts officers, explains who she is and wants to know what is going on. It turns out they've been watching her house waiting for the boyfriend. He's wanted by multi-state task force for massive check fraud. Police assumed she was in on it since they cohabited. He's evidently still married and has pulled girlfriends into this scheme of his in multiple states. Mill was completely oblivious to his deceptions. With her cooperating, she explains she's to meet with him shortly to give him some of his possessions like he asked. Police warn her not to tip him off but set up sting at meet and nab him. Search her house and find boxes of fake checks ready to be filled out. He went to jail for several years, but I hear he's out by now. I reminded my wife of my day one impression of this guy. She was stunned. My brother's wife could be related to this dude. She's led him into a life of crime. My first AA sponsor acted really weird around me after we started getting to know each other better. I was 18 and he was a good deal older. After the first few months of sobriety the season changed and summer came around. He would start saying weird, kind of off things like, let's go to the hotel and go swimming, or let's go to the health complex and use the sauna. He'd even asked me to stay the night with him a few times. Now, everybody in the sober community know a good part of each other. I started asking about my sponsor, and everybody that knew him had ever known him to be a weirdo. I still had an uncomfortable feeling about him though. I subtly told him I was looking for a new sponsor, and sure enough, he took it as a breakup. I told him we could still be friends and go to meetings together, but I just wanted to get advice from others. So basically like I'm just moving on, no hard feelings type of thing. He gradually stopped showing up to meetings and talking to me. Eventually it was like he had fallen off the face of the earth. Months later I tried calling him and his phone was off. I even drove past his apartment only to see a for rent sign on the yard. His apartment was the second floor of a converted 2-story house. Now, fast forward 3 years. I get a letter in the mail from him, from prison. My feeling about this dude was right. He had gotten charged with child pornography. He was on a gay dating site and met some kid who I guess he had frequent encounters with. He claims that they only hung out and that the kid wanted him to take pictures of himself. But I'm not stupid. That dude gave me creepy vibes most of the whole time I've known him. I do not speak to him anymore. TLDR. My first AA sponsor turned out to be a pedophile. A guy at work. He was an okay enough guy, seemingly friendly enough. Always carried those fireball candies with him and would offer them to people. Even though he seemed fine, something to me felt kind of off. I'm not even sure what exactly, just something. Fast forward a few years and he's busted for trying to chat up minors online and attempting to hook up with them. My only thought was he was always offering candy. What a stereotype. Rode the bus and Jeffrey Dahmer sat next to me. Introduced himself as Jeff. Yes, I'm sure it was him. Immediately got a weird vibe. Asked me questions about my computer science book. I was in college at the time. Seemed nervous. And frankly, like he was hitting on me. I'm a straight guy. Asked me if I would join him for lunch. I said no. I didn't realize he meant I was lunch. Anyway, turns out he was on the lam and the feds got him about a week later. I contacted the FBI and they asked me a few questions and verified it was probably him. Officer was super nice. TLDR. Was almost a serial killer's lunch. About 10 years ago a new guy started at work in one of the lower tier jobs as a translator. I took an instant dislike to him, and unfortunately was forced to spend a couple afternoons with him showing him how things worked. I chatted with him thinking maybe I was being too harsh in my opinion, but talking to him made things worse. I told my manager I didn't like the way he interacted with me as a female, and considering I outranked him by quite a lot, he seemed to have an overinflated view that he was extremely important and superior to me. One very weird thing about him is he always wore a suit with his hair slicked back. It just didn't fit with the way anyone dresses at my work, and certainly not when you are in one of the lowest paying roles, but he seemed oblivious to this. Even worse, He only had one suit and it was bright blue, not even subtle. I spotted him once on his day off and he was with friends all dressed like normal men in their 20s, but he was still wearing that damned suit. He just looked odd compared to his peer group. Anyway, after a couple months he stopped showing up to work. The manager made a few calls and his family said there was a family emergency he was dealing with and they weren't sure yet when he would be back. A day or so later the manager got an anonymous phone call from a woman who said the family had lied. He was in jail for attempted murder. She eventually disclosed she was his wife and the one he tried to kill, which the boss was able to confirm with the police. His family thought the wife was a horrible person for getting him in trouble. He hung himself while in custody. I honestly didn't care. Absolutely. I met the guy outside my dorm building during my first week of my junior year of college. Transfer student. Outside sat a large picnic table for all the smokers to gather around. He was an older student, majored in forestry, but there was something about him, he just seemed dangerous. His mannerisms were different than what I was used to. I had met a few girls earlier in the week who also smoked about the same amount as I did, and we decided to hang out on the weekend. John decides that he knows of this house party that we should all go to. I'm not much of a party goer but I was new, why not? They thought likewise. We end up at this party and it's all fun and games until one of the girls gets sick. She's puking everywhere, so I be the gentleman and take care of her. Call a ride, walk her back, make sure she's in bed and has water, all that good stuff. The next morning I wake up hungover and feeling like deep fried dog crap. Later on I get a text from one of the girls asking if I had seen John and if I knew where her car was. No clue. Throughout the day, the events from the night before start to come together. Insanity is the umbrella term I use for it. Turns out the guy got hammered, pounding back bottles because the girl that wasn't sick shrugged off his advances. So he's peeing drunk. He get in her car and tells her that he's taking it back to campus and before she can say no, he's stolen her car. Instead of taking it back to campus he heads towards the lake, opposite direction. He never makes it to the lake. Instead he totals the car and walks to the hospital. He ends up fleeing the hospital. Turns out he was wanted for numerous charges, destruction of private property, warrants, falsified identity, etc. The dude was a piece of work. Needless to say, I don't hang out with people that I think are off anymore. No matter the social conventions I think I am bucking. I used to have photos of the vehicle because we had to go identify it. Roof was all caved in and just a heap of metal. We don't know how he survived outside of going ragdoll from the alcohol. It sucks that drunk drivers usually aren't the ones to die when they crash. It's usually the victims who die. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.